Good morning guys, welcome to my unboxing and review of the real grade Tallgeese II. This is a 2018 Premium Bandai release that I got for $28, which is only $1 more than the standard real grade Tallgeese, which was a standard release from also 2018, I believe, that you can regularly find in the States, which seems pretty fair considering this is mostly going to be the same as the Tallgeese I, pretty much just being a color swap in terms of the torso, shield, and thrusters, alongside having a new head sculpt. You can see it has a kind of Destiny teardrop thing going on, coming down from the eyes, and a very different head crest. This was, of course, the suit piloted by Trays, and even in universe, this has very minimal upgrades over the Tallgeese I, pretty much only being located in the head unit. I think it has improved sensors, and that's about it. Apart from that, it is essentially identical to the Tallgeese I, which is a great real grade. Full disclosure, the Tallgeese I was my first real grade I've ever built, and I messed it up pretty bad. I snapped the peg going from the shoulder into the torso, and the very thin connector that pins the side skirts to the thighs. So hopefully I learned my lesson from the other real grades I've built, and I handle this one with a little more care. I know this uses some of the advanced MS joint, but not for the full skeleton, which is quite good because this is real grade number, based on real grade number 28. After the Unicorn, that was when they started dialing back the advanced MS joint in kits. So this should be a pretty nice real grade build. As per usual, being a Premium Bandai box, this is going to be in a monochrome blue for the Tallgeese II's main color besides white. So, getting right into it. Inside the box, we get 4 bags of runners, which is not a whole lot, but again, the Tallgeese II isn't that like crazy of a mobile suit, so I wasn't expecting that many parts, nothing super crazy. Again, I built the Tallgeese I. It's nice and solid for what it is. And of course, we were also going to be getting the standard real grade style manual of the Tallgeese II with a close-up of the CG render of the Tallgeese here, all in full color. Of course, with the bloody teardrop Destiny thing going on with the face and the glowing eyes there. So of course, getting right into it, you have our parts list right here, pretty typical stuff. And then you get into the build in real grade fashion. You're going to be starting with the legs and building up. Of course, you're going to have the foot units being part of runner B, which is the advanced MS joint. And then you assemble all of the frame first and then layer the armor on after. The frame doesn't look too complex in terms of assembly, just a few parts that just come together, but all of it should look quite nice once it's fully built. And then, of course, is talking about just articulating the leg before you assemble everything just to make sure it works properly and you don't break anything. Very important for real grade kits. And then, of course, talking about how a bunch of these parts are going to be undergated, because if you've ever built the real grade Tallgeese, you'll know it has a very glossy finish, and having nub marks all over it would really ruin the gloss. So very glad they decided to undergate many of these parts. And of course, you get into the waist unit, which is built in a very traditional frame, like very mini master grade style. Then you build your back skirt, then attach both the legs, then move on to the chest, which again also looks like it's going to be building up in a mini master grade fashion here. You have your back units here for the rear thrusters, then you layer the armor on top. Move on to the arms, which is going to be using the advanced MS joint for the base of the arms, and then you kind of build the armor on top of it. Then you build your shoulders, flex the arm, make sure nothing breaks, move on to the left arm, attach everything together, and then you build the backpack burner units, which do have a decent amount of part separation right here. I did have a bit of an issue on my Tallgeese one, that where the verniers, when they articulate to open up to really show the Tallgeese like flying forward, they wouldn't really stay open. So we'll see if this one has the same issue, or if that was a skill issue on my part when I was building my first real grade. And then of course you get into your weapons, the Dober gun, the shield, and the 2 beam sabers. So the Dober gun's a really cool weapon here. I do really like it on the Tallgeese. I do like it a little bit more than the mega cannon that the Tallgeese III has, but you see it built up right over there. Then you move on to the shield, talking about attaching the Dober gun onto the sub-arm, going onto the right shoulder, talking about how to hold it in the handles, as well as the secondary handle, talking about mounting the shield, talking about action base adapter, and showing off the various articulation gimmicks for posing the vernier units on the back. And then of course you're going to be getting your decal guide here. I guess a bit more minimal decals compared to a lot of other real grades. Normally they're completely covered in them, but for the Tallgeese II, it seems they subdued themselves a little bit in terms of the decals going on it. So that's going to be here. We're going to be getting real grade style standard sticker style decals, and of course your color unit in here for both the Tallgeese II and the standing pilot figure of Trays. As for the contents of the bags, inside the bags, you're going to be getting 13 runners, which is kind of typical for a real grade, at least a more modern one that isn't going to be using a full runner B advanced MS joint, which is nice that this isn't using the full thing. Runner Bs of older kits where they use it for the full frame has a reputation for being floppy for a reason. They're not great. A lot of them don't hold up. Some of them do, like the Mark II famously holds up super well. The Unicorn is kind of has the opposite problem where it's too sturdy, but it is nice that this kit was made when they were starting to transition into the mini master grade style of real grades that we know and love today. In addition, you're of course going to be getting this real grade style sticker sheet with a ton of metallic accent parts here that are going to go on the frame, the stickers here for the eye cameras and the camera for the Dober gun, as well as a bunch of marking stickers over here. A bit of a shame that this didn't come with water slides, especially because the glossy surface does kind of exacerbate the borders on the stickers, and especially because the Tallgeese II uses a slightly darker color palette with a lot of blue on the kit, so those borders are going to be showing up a little bit more. You'll see how that looks on the completed kit. As for the runners themselves, so these runners were printed in February of 2025, starting with runner A here. A lot of these are going to be reused from the original RG Tallgeese, like this one. This is going to be a multi-color runner coming in 3 different colors. We are of course going to have white here for a number of parts, for things like the thruster units and accent parts over here. We have gray for some frame parts, and then we're going to have blue for a number of accent parts, including parts of the lower torso and parts for the skirts. Of course, being a real grade kit, this is going to be using runner B for advanced MS joint 12 here, for pre-molded frame and joint parts for the arms, the feet, and some parts for the legs. Runner C1 here in a very high gloss blue, going to be a number of armor parts for things like the sub-thrusters, the vernier units, the torso, our standing pilot figure here of trays, as well as the main shield here for the Tallgeese. Runners D1 and D2 are going to be a number of accent parts. D1 here in blue, going to be accent parts for things like the shield. D2 here going to be in yellow for accent parts for the bunch of vent parts, as well as parts for the new head crest. Now these runners are labeled just simply RG Tallgeese, even though these are new for the Tallgeese II. Runners E1 and E2, E2 being a copy of the top half of E1, going to be a number of armor parts for things like the legs and skirts in this very high gloss white. Runner F in a primer frame gray, going to be a ton of our frame parts, as well as including parts, all the parts for our swappable finger style hands, parts for the Dober gun over here. You have the kind of a set of crossed hands here if you want to kind of plant the Dober gun into the ground and have the Tallgeese standing over it. And of course you're going to have joint parts and things like that over here. Runners G1 and G2, G2 being a copy of this top half of G1 in this primer frame gray, going to be a ton of frame parts here for all over the Tallgeese, for frame parts for things like the shield and other joint parts. Runner H1 here in plain clear, going to be a number of parts for things like cameras, the eyes there, and we have 2 clear beam sabers here, which look pretty interesting. Runner H3 going to be this tiny runner consisting of a single red part, presumably for color separation for the bloody teardrop thing going on in the face. And of course, to go with our beam sabers, besides those plain clear parts you saw earlier, we have runner SB12 here for a set of 1/144th scale beam saber effect parts in clear pink. So with all that out of the way, I will see you after the build. Alright, welcome back. Here's the real grade Tallgeese II, snap built, panel lined, although there weren't as many panel lining opportunities as I was really expecting on this kit, and decaled up with the included sticker style decals. Now, getting right into the build, this is of course going to be mostly a color swap of the real grade Tallgeese EW, the standard release, so for the most part it's pretty good. This is around when they started transitioning the real grade line into more of a mini master grade style of building, instead of relying mostly on the advanced MS joint inner frame. So where the advanced MS joint is used in this kit are as the base framework for the arms. Unfortunately, there is a part in each of the legs to act as armor slide gimmick when it moves around, and there's a part of the advanced MS joint for each of the feet. So besides that, this is pretty much all mini master grade style build. So it's going to be pretty solid overall, although I do have some issues with balance. In particular, the feet and ankles have a bit of an issue with articulation. That means this kit has some trouble standing up. You are definitely going to want to have an action base for this kit. This kit does tend to fall over quite a bit, especially with the large super vernier unit on the back, making it a bit back heavy. But apart from that, the build is very solid. Lots of very nice parts layering, lots of armor sliding, which you'll see in the articulation section. These sub arms for the verniers and the ones for the weapons, which you'll see in the accessory section, all allow for pretty decent articulation. All of it is very solid. There's a lot of very nice gimmicks opening up with the skirts, both the side and the back. The super verniers, of course, have a ton of articulation. Unfortunately, though, I think it's just a bit of an issue with the real grade Tallgeese in general, because I remember having this problem with the real grade Tallgeese EW as well. The super verniers do feel a little bit loose in their construction, and when you want to open up the flaps and stuff, they have some trouble staying open. They will want to kind of fall shut pretty loosely. So that's a bit of an issue with this kit. In addition to that, the adapter piece that pins the side skirts to a hole in the side of the leg are very fragile. There's a small tab in them that's supposed to stop it from kind of sliding too far into the side skirt. That tab broke off on this adapter here. So just be careful, because they're it is a very small and fragile piece. Besides that, the only new piece of construction for this kit is going to be in the head. This head crest is brand new, and there's plenty of color separation there, as you can see with the white and yellow sections, and the face is brand new. It also has plenty of color separation, which you'll see as this spins around. So in general, this is mostly just a color swap of the real grade Tallgeese EW, which is mostly solid but has some issues with balance and looseness in some parts, specifically in the super verniers. So getting right into aesthetics, this being mostly a recolor of the Tallgeese I with a different head, is going to hit most of the same points as that kit, but in general I do prefer this kit more because I really do like the color scheme of blue and white over just plain white of the Tallgeese. I'm not the biggest fan of monochromatic mobile suits where they're just one color. It seems a little bit boring to me, especially the Tallgeese TV color version. I have it just for completion's sake and to replace the Tallgeese EW on my shelf because that was the first real grade I ever built and it's pretty rough, but in general I really don't like the TV color version because it's so monochromatic. It's almost all white. This kit, however, does break it up quite nicely with blue in the skirts, torso, shoulders, and the super verniers, which I really think complements the Tallgeese very well. I get the symbolism of it. Trays want it to be blue to represent like the Earth, like the blue planet. But I do think for the, I guess, royal duelist theming that Trays really like to go with for this kit, that would have been like a royal purple instead. And at some point I may just take the stickers off of this and repaint it in purple, but that's a project for future me. One thing I do want to point out with the aesthetic is of course going to be the real grade decals. They are very annoying. As you can see here on the super vernier units, there are decals here on the top that are larger than the surface they're going on. So they're supposed to wrap around the side, but they don't really stick very well because there's such a small area of sticker being pressed onto the sides that they will peel up and look really bad with this clear part just floating in the air. In addition, the addition of blue to this kit's color scheme does mean that the stickers on the blue parts will look pretty bad. You can see it here on the shoulder with this border being very apparent. Although some parts like the Tallgeese text on the kit's left shoulder here does look fine because of how large the sticker is. And of course on the white parts, the stickers are going to look okay, except for of course the stickers that are larger than the surface area they're going on. And you see the borders kind of poking outside of the part, which is really annoying. So, in general, if you want your Tallgeese II in particular, because the Tallgeese 1 and 3 are mostly white in color scheme, if you want the Tallgeese II to look good, you should probably opt for water slides, because these borders on the blue parts are really obnoxious, especially on the shield here. The border on the text is really, really bad. The stripes are okay, it's just the text that are horrible. But of course, the main visual difference besides the color scheme between this kit and the Tallgeese 1 is going to be in the face. So this has a kind of Destiny Gundam thing going on, or rather, the Destiny Gundam has a Tallgeese 2 thing going on because this, of course, was designed first. But as you can see here, for the eyes, instead of the visor used by the Tallgeese 1, you get a Gundam-style dual eye camera setup in green here. And of course, in sticking with the design language of all the other wing mobile suits, this has a very thin and mean glare with the brows sloping down over the eyes. This has a bloody teardrop thing going on underneath the eyes. Again, Destiny Gundam is reminiscent of this. And of course, this has a more traditional Gundam-style muzzle with the two, I think, ventilation slits, as well as a protruding chin section, which I do like a lot more than the Tallgeese 1's face. The only part of this design that I don't like more than the Tallgeese 1 is the head crest. Of course, I really do like the Tallgeese 1's very Roman-inspired head crest. This makes it look like a rooster's head plumage. It looks very bird-like, which I guess is more fitting for the Tallgeese's name. It's just something that looks a little goofy in my opinion. Although I do know some people do have some issues with the proportions, how cylindrical the arms and legs are, especially with how thick the leg is at the bottom, how it doesn't really taper off in any way like a traditional mobile suit design. But in general, I do like how this kit looks quite a bit. Of course, in typical real grade fashion, this kit is going to be pretty much entirely color accurate and add a whole bunch of new details that weren't present on the original design through the addition of metallic stickers all over the joints and things like that. As you can see, I used pretty much every sticker on this sticker sheet that you were supposed to. The only two color correcting stickers that weren't like metallic frame parts that go in the joints that I don't really count because, again, not really part of the line, are just kind of an addition made for the real grade line in general, are going to be the eye sticker, of course, and as well as this very tiny green camera sticker for the Dober gun. I don't know how you can see this. This very tiny circle in the middle there. But yeah, apart from that, everything in this kit is entirely color accurate. For a quick size comparison, here's the real grade Tallgeese II next to a standard sized high grade, being the high grade Blue Destiny Unit 1. As you can see, the real grade Tallgeese II is actually about the same head height as the Blue Destiny Unit 1, even though the proportions are notably smaller. You can see the arms are shorter than the Blue Destiny's arms. You can see the head is smaller than the Blue Destiny's head. Really, where all the height is gained is going to be in the elongated torso of the Tallgeese II compared to the Blue Destiny over there, as you can see, because the legs are roughly in line. Even I think the Tallgeese is supposed to be shorter than a typical Gundam in its universe, because in general the wing mobile suits are a bit smaller than normal. But of course, with Katoki design language and the readjusting of proportions for the real grade line, The very leggy proportions combined with the elongated torso does make this a little bit taller than a standard-sized high grade. For accessories, here's the real grade Tallgeese II with everything it comes with. Starting as usual with our hand options, these are going to be swappable finger-style hands. You are of course going to get 2 closed fists that I have on the kit right now. You'll also get these 2 very nice open expressive hands, 1 for each side. You will get 2 standard holding hands, 1 for each side, with the index finger kind of extended a little bit to also act kind of like a trigger finger hand for the right side for use with the Dober gun, which we'll talk about in a moment. The left side is going to be used mostly to hold onto the handle of the shield, or you can use it to hold onto a beam saber if you wish. For the beam saber specifically, the Tallgeese II has this hand only for the right side with a very bent wrist that allows for more natural melee poses with the Tallgeese II, and also enables for fencing-like thrusting poses, which Trey's being a very much an enthusiast of mobile suit duels, very much favored thrusting and dueling, like almost rapier-style attacks with beam sabers rather than traditional attacks. You can see this in animations and things like SD Gundam, where the Tallgeese I has normal kind of slashing beam saber attacks, and while the Tallgeese II has thrusting attacks to kind of differentiate the two animation-wise. Of course, you're going to get a rather unique double hand here, with the 2 hands crossed to kind of hold onto the barrel of the Dober gun while it's into the ground, like it's doing like a royal pose with like a sword or something planted into the ground, so that's pretty cool. You'll see that in the posing section. We'll of course get this standing pilot figure of Trey's Kushrenada here, standing on, I think this is supposed to be like a podium or something. He's supposed to be giving a speech or something like that, so that's pretty cool. You will get this action base adapter for posing the Tallgeese in the air, and I do really recommend having an action base for this kit because of the aforementioned balance issues with the feet and ankles over there. You will get 4 beam saber effect parts. You will get 2 in clear pink here, pretty typical stuff. They are curved a little bit, so I don't know if that's like damage that was in the runner, because one of them looks pretty crooked and the other looks slightly curved, so I don't know about that, but pretty standard beam saber effect parts. And of course 2 of them are going to be in plain clear, which is a little odd. I don't really know the point of this. If you know, you can let me know in the comments. My only guess is that this is so you can paint them a clear colored paint and have it be any beam saber color you want, which is interesting that they included it, but I don't really think it was necessary. And then of course you get the main offensive and defensive armaments of the Tallgeese II, starting with the shield here, with this medium kind of round shield that looks very nice, of course in this glossy blue plastic. I forgot to mention that earlier, but the Tallgeese is mostly in gloss, and pretty much all the gloss parts are undergated, so there's not a nub mark to be seen. They learned their lesson from the real grade Sinanju. And of course the shield is going to be on an articulating arm that can swing around and pivot and do all of this nice articulating arm stuff, so you can get the shield in pretty much any angle you would want it to be in. In addition, the shield doubles as storage for the 2 beam sabers. And of course you want to pose the Tallgeese grabbing one off the shield, which you'll see in the posing section. You can just swing the beam sabers out like so and have the Tallgeese grabbing onto either one. And of course you get this very nice inner frame detail, and there's a secondary handle in here that the Tallgeese can hold onto for reinforcement when it's defending against attacks. And then you get the Tallgeese's main ranged weapon, the Dober gun here, which is of course also going to be on an articulating arm, which will do a lot of the same things that you saw with the shield arm, although this one does extend out a little bit further, just because the Tallgeese does want the Dober gun extended a little bit further from its body than the shield, which it wants pressed close for protection. But the Dober gun also has additional articulation. Of course, the main trigger handle will swing out when it's in use. The secondary handle here that the Tallgeese can use if it wants, although I don't really remember ever seeing the Tallgeese using the Dober gun two-handed. Of course, the barrel, when in use, can extend out like so. There's a bit of a, I don't know what exactly this is, that can articulate up and down. It might be a magazine lock, or it's supposed to be, or something like that. And of course, the magazine can pop out, although you don't really get any spares, and the hands aren't really conducive for posing the Tallgeese reloading the Dober gun, so I don't exactly know why you would want to do that, but you can if you want. So in general, the Dober gun's a really cool weapon. I do love how it looks, and you'll see a lot more of it in the posing section. So yeah, in terms of accessories, the Tallgeese II has pretty much everything you would expect it to and more. So all really nice to see, especially those hand options. I do love when kids have a ton of hand options for all the different posing options it provides, so very nice to see here. Getting into articulation then for the head. In terms of a look up, you will get it about that far before it will want to pop off the joint. The neck is going to be on a bit of a hinge, so you can have it look like the entire neck assembly is pivoting up when the Tallgeese is looking up, which is interesting. It can look down a fair amount, but nowhere near as far as a lot of other kits can. It can have some very nice side-to-side tilt, and of course, it can 360 about the peg as per usual, although it will want to pop off of the ball joint. In the shoulders then, I'm just trying to be very careful because on my Tallgeese EW I did snap one of the shoulder pegs. So you do get an okay swing forward, but nothing special. The shoulder armor can pivot upward independent of the arm, which will allow for just about a 90-degree arm raise, so nothing too special. You of course get rotation in the upper bicep, full 360 about the peg on the shoulder. A double joint in the elbow with this nice armor slide gimmick here does give an almost 180-degree bend before the cuff here will want to collide with the shoulder armor. One thing to note is that this is as far, like, kind of straight as the arm goes. There will always be at least a slight bend in the elbow, which is a little annoying, but it's mostly fine because I don't know about most people, but I do pose all of my kits doing like cool stuff on the shelf. I don't just have them in neutral poses, so this won't really be a factor for me. And of course the wrist is going to be on a ball joint, which will do ball joint things, and notably has a lot more mobility in the wrist than other ball joints do, which will definitely help for more natural kind of melee poses and helping to hold onto the handles of its weapons. In the torso then, of course, the cockpit hatch can open up. There is no seated pilot figure in typical real grade fashion. For ab crunch, you will get a decent ab crunch forward, okay ab crunch backwards. It doesn't really tilt back all that much. All it really does is kind of express some of the detail here in the lower torso. There is going to be a latch in the back here, which can hold it, which can lock the torso back, but in my experience, it doesn't really hold on very well, and the Tallgeese II just kind of pops out of it, so it's basically might as well not even be there. Of course, for the super vernier units, they're going to be on the sub-arms, which will allow it to kind of swing out and rotate and do all of this really nice articulation. For articulating the super verniers themselves, this fin can pop out, these two sides can open up. The side with the wing here is supposed to be able to slide down, although it's a little bit tight. Yeah, it's supposed to be able to slide down, so the thrusters are in line. And then the bottom here can also open up to reveal another thruster, so you can have this really impressive thruster display if you want the Tallgeese like kind of flying forward at max speed. And when not in use, it will just close up like so. For the skirts then, the Tallgeese kind of has a reversed skirt thing going on where the front skirt is fixed in place with this giant crotch thruster, and the back can, of course, swing backwards, and the back can open up to reveal more thrusters in the back skirt. Of course, each side can open individually. The side skirts are this bit of an interesting assembly where this armor piece here will kind of rotate to match where this is. Of course, you can see the adapter here pinning it into the side of the leg. In addition, the side skirts can open up like so. I don't know exactly why you would do this. There's no thrusters in there, I believe. This might be a bit of an odd-shaped thruster, but I'm not exactly sure. You can let me know in the comments. But of course, the side skirts will mostly stay pinned to the legs, which looks pretty good. In terms of kicks then, I will disconnect the side skirts for that. We'll get just about a 90-degree kick forward. There is no hip drop or hip swing mechanism, unfortunately. You will not get any better kicks than that. Just be careful when you're handling this kick, as the back skirts do tend to fall off fairly easily. You will get rotation in the upper thigh, although not too much before the leg will want to collide with the waist section. You will get about 45 degrees outwards and very little inwards. For back kicks then, if you swing the back skirt back, you will get just about 45 degrees. And for side raises, you get a little over 90 degrees, which is actually pretty nice. Just be careful, it does feel a little bit stiff when I did that. In the knee then, you will of course get a double bend with this really nice armor slide gimmick. There's the advanced MS joint part that I was talking about earlier. You can see it replicating these kind of piston details inside of the knee. So all of that looks really good. The ankles then are where this gets really, really disappointing. The ankle armor is of course going to be fixed in place. For side to side, you get pretty much nothing. This foot is locked in place. It's very stiff. For a downward tilt, you will actually get okay ankle movement. For upward tilt, you will get very minor ankle movement. There is some toe separation. It will allow the toe to tilt up a tiny bit, and it can't really tilt down. So overall, articulation is mostly okay. It's a little underwhelming in the arms. In the torso, it's good. In the legs, it's fine, and in the feet and ankles it's very disappointing. Where the articulation really does shine is expressing all of the thruster details and things like the back skirts, the super verniers, and maybe the side skirts. Again, I'm not exactly sure, but we'll see the articulation in action in some poses. So getting the Tallgeese II into a bit of a spin here, starting with the usual running and gutting pose. First off, I'm very surprised that he can even hold a one-legged standing pose to begin with. Given the balance issue I was talking about earlier and the lack of articulation in the ankle, I did have to spin the foot about 45 degrees to the left, so it does look a little bit unnatural compared to a normal running and gunning pose, and I'd have to throw the right leg quite a bit in order to actually get it standing. But once it's in this pose, it does show off kind of what this kit is good at. When the legs are fully expressed, you can really see the very odd proportions of the Tallgeese, and I really think it does help it stand out. The irregular silhouette with the side skirts kind of flinging out, the super verniers on the back, the shield auxiliary arm being visible, as well as the Dober gun firing upwards all look great. Just one thing to keep in mind is that articulating the arm itself for both the shield and the Dober gun to kind of match what the hands are doing is pretty awkward. For the Dober gun, it does take a lot of fiddling with the model to actually get the handle looking kind of natural, the Dober gun pointing where you want it to. For the shield, I just gave up on having the hand hold onto the secondary handle entirely, and I just have the closed fist there kind of mimicking holding the hand. From a lot of angles, it's really not that apparent, and it looks fine with the shield there. It's really only an issue when you specifically look behind the shield, so I really think to save yourself a lot of hassle, that's the option you should be going for. Just pretending like the hand's holding onto the shield and posing the fist kind of behind where the handle would normally be instead of actually having it hold onto the handle, because with the articulated arm, the shield does tend to rotate a little bit, and the hand does not rotate with it, so it just pops the fingers off constantly every time you try to adjust the shield. So yeah, that's why I will not have the holding hand holding onto the secondary handle on the shield in any of these poses. But overall, this is an okay pose, but the issues with the leg, foot, and ankle articulation does mean the Tallgeese does look pretty unnatural, and in this running and gunning pose, pretty much the only way it can actually balance on one foot without support from an action base or something, so I would not really consider posing it doing this on the shelf. So of course, to cover all my bases, here's the Tallgeese II crouching in a defensive pose, holding the shield out in front of it while it's deploying the Dober gun. Here I have the right arm with the open hand, looking like it's about to grip onto the gun to fire it upwards at a target. Now this shows off what I was talking about earlier, where the Tallgeese doesn't look all that great when it's scrunching itself up, and you can't really see its very unique, odd silhouette alongside the proportions of the long legs being fully visible. In the scrunched up pose, it looks fine, and I think the ability to pose it about to do something with the auxiliary arm kind of swinging out and articulating it mid action is really cool, and I think it's a unique option that a lot of other kits kind of struggle to pull off, being about to perform an action rather than being in the middle of an action or post-action. This kind of preparing pose is a thing that the Tallgeese uniquely excels at, just I'd rather not have it do it while crouching. You'll see a pose when I talk about the conclusion where it's about to reach for one of the beam sabers being deployed out of the shield, and I think that's a much better option than this because it's flying through the air, you can really see it expressing the legs, and in the air you don't have to deal with the balance problems it has while standing. Crouching, not really an issue, it can balance crouching perfectly fine as you might expect. It's just that this doesn't look as good as it could, even though the upper half of the Tallgeese here in this pose looks pretty good. It's just the lower half that you really want fully extended. So I would consider doing maybe a modified version of this pose in the air with the super verniers being fully opened up and showing the Tallgeese boosting around. Definitely not while crouching. Speaking of getting it into the air, here's the Tallgeese II soaring through the air, the super verniers almost fully opened. The inner thrusters on the side without the wing do collide with each other if you have both of them open at once, so I have them partially opened here. The shield arm is being thrown back, while the sword arm with the beam saber is being thrust forward with the wrist bent to imitate a downward thrusting attack. And I think this really shows off what the Tallgeese is really capable of, with having all of the thrusters out in the open. It really gives the impression that the Tallgeese is moving incredibly fast. The long legs being fully expressed, flung backwards, really does also add to this impression. It just conveys a whole sense of motion and speed that a lot of other kits kind of struggle with because of the way all of the thrusters on the Tallgeese articulate and the armor opens up to expose them. It really does show the thrusters being used a lot better than a lot of other kits that just have to kind of manipulate the limbs and such and just pretend like the thrusters are going. Here you can kind of act like they're going much easier. In addition, the bent wrist does make the Tallgeese able to perform these thrusting attacks a lot more easily than other kits. A lot of other kits can't really do them at all. The Tallgeese II can do them very easily. The only issue I have with this kind of pose is the elbow. The inability to fully straighten out the arm is a big issue in my opinion and does make this look a little bit awkward. Definitely the bent elbow is more conducive to slashing attacks, which works great for the Tallgeese I. For the Tallgeese II to stand out, especially in consideration with a lot of its attack animations in games and such, I really do wish these thrusting poses would look better. I am getting the Tallgeese Flugel in August, which has a big lance, and that should excel in these kinds of thrusting poses, so I'm excited to see what that looks like. If you want to see that video when it comes out, make sure to sub and hit the notification bell. This is definitely a pose I would consider doing on the shelf with this kit. It looks mostly fantastic apart from the elbows, and in general, the Tallgeese II really just does look at home in the air. So in conclusion, the real grade Tallgeese II is pretty much just a recolor of the Tallgeese I with a slightly different head. A lot of what I say here is going to apply to the Tallgeese I, which will all factor into my recommendation at the end of this video whether or not you should buy this kit. But for the Tallgeese II, this build is mostly solid. This is a transitionary period for real grades where they're moving from the Advanced MS joint to the mini master grade style that we all know and love today, with pretty much every real grade from from 30 onward. The Tallgeese II does have a little bit more advanced MS joint than those kits. It has a bit of frame in the legs for the armor slide gimmick to show the pistons moving around inside of the frame. The arm frame is pretty much entirely advanced MS joint, and the feet are advanced MS joint. So what this means is that the leg articulation is mostly good. The arm articulation does suffer a little bit with the arm's inability to straighten out. The feet articulation is horrible, and it does have a lot of balance issues standing up. Especially combined with the super vernier thrusters, the lack of ankle articulation really does mean that this kit does tend to fall over backwards if you're not really careful if you're posing it standing, which is why I really recommend you have an action base with this kit. The only real standing pose I would consider having this kit do, you'll see at the very end, it's also in the thumbnail, is the one where the Tallgeese has the two kind of hands overlapping on top of the Dober gun, like it's planting it onto a blade into the ground. I think that's a really cool pose. That's pretty much the only thing I would consider it doing standing because of how kind of awkward it is to deal with while it's standing up because of the lack of ankle articulation. But again, apart from the stability issues aside, and the kind of looseness in the super verniers on the back is also a tiny bit of an issue, but not the biggest deal in the world. The build is pretty good across the board. In terms of aesthetics then, this kit is pretty much entirely color accurate to the Tallgeese II, and as far as the Tallgeese II design goes, it's essentially just a color swap of the Tallgeese I, with a lot of blue in the waist, torso, shoulders, and super vernier units as opposed to the mostly monochrome white that the Tallgeese I uses. The Tallgeese II really does stand out quite a bit. I do love the blue on this kit. I do think as far as theming goes, it would fit a little bit better if it were a royal purple rather than a blue, but nitpick aside, the blue looks great on this kit. The head is where most of the actual sculpting differences are. In the face, it has a more Gundam-like face as opposed to the plain visor and plain muzzle that the Tallgeese I has. This has the very iconic Gundam double ventilation slit in the muzzle. It has a protruding chin, and it has a double eye camera sensor rather than the single visor. The one aesthetically different part of the Tallgeese II compared to the one that I'm not really a fan of is the very rooster-like head crest. I really don't like how it looks. I like the Roman head crest look of the Tallgeese I a lot more, so at some point I might try and transplant the head crest from that onto this, but as far as accurate Tallgeese II models, this is essentially perfect, and that extends to the accessories. This has pretty much every accessory you could ever want, including a extremely wide array of hand options that all look great. The only thing that might be missing is a second bent wrist holding hand for the left side. If you want to have the left side doing a thrusting attack, you can't really do it. You're stuck with the standard holding hands, but for the right side, it can perform thrusting attacks very admirably with that bent wrist hand option. And in terms of posing, a lot of the articulation I did mention earlier with the balance issues. The only other things to keep in mind are the articulating arms for the Dober gun and the shield. It can be a little bit awkward to fiddle with getting the hands to cooperate with the articulation of the arms. Specifically the shield, I would just give up on trying to use the handle on the shield with the left holding hand, just because the way the shield tilts, it just tends to pry the fingers off every time you're trying to articulate the shield. So I would just recommend having a closed fist, kind of mimicking holding the handle behind the shield. That also allows you to rotate the shield however you want to align the decals on the front to kind of match the way you want it to look to the eye. The decals are another thing to mention. The sticker style decals on this kit, most of them look horrible on the blue. If you really want to decal this kit up, I would recommend just getting water slides for this kit. On the blue, they look horrible. On the white, they look fine, except for the parts on the super verniers where the sticker area is actually larger than the surface they're being applied to, so they'll stick out from the side and look really, really bad. So would I recommend you buy this kit? Yes, if you like the Tallgeese II. If you just like the design in general, I wouldn't necessarily say go for the Tallgeese II, because, again, it's a P-Bandai release, and if it's not being reprinted in your region at any certain time, you're going to have to deal with scalpers and resellers, and you really shouldn't have to. So if you like the idea of this kit but aren't necessarily too attached to the Tallgeese II, just get the real grade Tallgeese EW. That's a standard release that's pretty widely available, and it has all of the good points of this kit. The only difference is the color scheme is, in my opinion, a little more boring, being mostly monochromatic white, but it is broken up with a number of yellow accents, and the face and head crest are different. I think the head crest is better in the Tallgeese one. Don't really like the face compared to this kit. In general, the kit's pretty good. There are a couple of stability issues, some articulation issues with the subarms, and the decals don't look great, and apart from that, it is a fantastic real grade, and in addition to any collection that I can wholeheartedly recommend. The Tallgeese in general, not specifically this one. So that was my review of the real grade Tallgeese II. What do you think of this kit? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, give it a like. If you like reviews like these, please make sure to hit the notification bell. And I'll see you next time with my review of the high grade Crew Cruise Doan's Island Zaku 2 High Mobility type. I'll see you then.